I was lying on the kitchen floor, blood in my mouth, ribs screaming, and the only thing colder than the tile beneath me was my brother stepping over me without a word. He didn't help me. He didn't call for help. He just walked out, like I was nothing. And when my phone buzzed, I thought maybe, just maybe he regretted it. But the message said 4 words that shattered something inside me forever. You need to back off. That was the moment I realized. They never saw me as family. I was just the guarantor, the fixer, the fallback. Until I took my name back and used it to burn down the dream house they built on my silence. Keep watching, because what they didn't know is that I had the receipts, and a courtroom full of truth waiting to be unleashed. The first thing I remember was the cold, not the emotional kind that creeps in slowly, but a physical jolt, the icy slap of my kitchen tiles against my cheek. For a second, I couldn't remember how I'd gotten there. Then came the taste, sharp, metallic, blood. My ribs throbbed with a pulsing pain that made each breath a strategy. I blinked, tried to focus, and saw Ethan. My brother. He wasn't looking at me. He was staring at the front door like he was late for a meeting. He stepped over my body, over me, like I was nothing more than spilled groceries on the floor. Not a word, not a glance. He left. My phone buzzed beside me on the tile, screen cracked. A message popped up from him. You need to back off. We're done. Tears didn't come right away. It wasn't sadness I felt. It was betrayal, sharp and unforgiving. My lip throbbed where Callie's fist had landed. My side ached where I'd hit the counter. But those were bruises that would fade. What Ethan did, that was a scar. I stared at the phone for a long time, and then I typed a single word. Understood. I hit send. The air in the apartment changed. A silence that wasn't peace. It was clarity. Because for them, my response probably meant I was retreating. The inconvenient older sister backing down once again. But for me, it meant something else entirely. It was the end of the Natalie they thought they knew. The fixer, the buffer, the emotional sponge. She was gone. I picked myself up, slowly. Every movement reminded me of Callie's fury, of Ethan's indifference. My reflection in the oven door was unrecognizable, swollen, split. But behind the bruises, something fierce had begun to flicker. I didn't call 911, not yet. I called Marissa. Natalie? She answered, her voice instantly alert. Are you okay? I tried to speak, but my throat tightened. The words tangled in my mouth. They hurt me, I whispered. Callie, she punched me, and Ethan, he just stood there. He left. There was no hesitation, no questioning, only fire. Don't move, she said. I'm coming, and you are calling the police, Natalie. Do you hear me? You are not letting this go. And I wasn't. Because this wasn't a family squabble. This was assault. This was a man I trusted walking away from me at my most vulnerable. And for the first time, I wasn't going to clean up the mess. I was going to expose it. You'd think being the older sibling with a steady career and zero drama would earn you a little respect. But in my family, I was never the story. I was the scaffolding that held the story up. Ethan was the golden boy, always had been. Even when he dropped out of college, even when he floated from job to job like a leaf on a breeze, Mom still called him her visionary. Me? I was the one who always had it together, the one who filed everyone's taxes, who showed up on time, who paid for dinner without making a scene. But that was background noise. Ethan was the music. I remember a Christmas Eve not too long ago. We were at my parents' house in Boulder, everyone half drunk on eggnog. Ethan casually mentioned he got promoted to assistant manager at a bike shop. Mom beamed like he'd won the lottery. She raised her glass, eyes glossy with pride. To my son building his empire, she said. Everyone clapped. Later that night, I told her I'd just been named lead on a Fortune 500 merger, my biggest account yet. Stock options, bonus package, the whole deal. She blinked, smiled politely, and said, That's nice, sweetheart, but don't overwork yourself. You'll scare the men away. I wasn't a daughter to be celebrated. I was a cautionary tale. Too independent, too much. And when Ethan brought Callie into the picture, things didn't get better. Callie came with wide eyes and a fragile voice. She was sweet in that broken doll kind of way. Her story, tragic. A tough childhood, a string of bad luck, a desire to start fresh. I saw myself in her, or rather, who I used to be. When she struggled to find work, I helped. I didn't just refer her, I rewrote her entire resume. When she couldn't afford her first apartment, I co-signed, paid the deposit, gave her furniture I didn't need. She cried and told me I was the sister she never had. I believed her. People warned me. Friends whispered, She's playing you. I brushed it off. She's family now, I said. She just needs a break. But lying on that cold kitchen floor, the bruises blooming across my skin, I saw the truth. She didn't see me as family. She saw me as leverage, a stepping stone. And Ethan, he saw me as disposable. That realization didn't break me, it focused me. Because if I was always the fixer, it was time to fix this, for good. The next morning, pain throbbed through my body like a second heartbeat. But my mind, clear, strangely calm. It was the kind of stillness that comes right before a storm breaks. Quiet, not because nothing is happening, but because everything is about to. I sat at my desk, wincing as I lowered myself into the chair. The login screen for my bank glowed at me like an invitation. I typed in my credentials, did the two-factor verification, and pulled up the loan documents. There it was, $680,000 mortgage. Ethan and Callie's dream house in Golden. The one with the wraparound porch, the barn-style garage, the fixer-upper they swore they'd turn into a forever home. But the loan, it wasn't theirs, not really, it was mine. They had the dream, I had the credit, my income, my spotless financial history. My name was the only reason that loan existed. I was the guarantor, their human insurance policy. And now I was done insuring them. Revoking a loan guarantee isn't like unsubscribing from a newsletter. It's layers of authentication, multiple warning screens, pop-ups that ask, "Are you sure?" Like the system itself doesn't believe anyone would willingly step away from this kind of commitment. Yes, I clicked again, yes. Security question, what was the name of your first pet? I typed Murphy. Mother's maiden name? Irony so thick I could choke on it, I typed it anyway. And then came the final screen, a legal statement in bold font, warning me that revoking the guarantee would likely result in the loan being canceled. I read every word. Then I signed. A digital signature, just a few loops and lines, but it detonated a bomb in their picture-perfect narrative. I closed the laptop and exhaled. The pain in my ribs was still there, but something else had shifted inside me. No more begging, no more appeasing. I was no longer their foundation. I spent the rest of the day documenting everything. I went to urgent care, had the bruises examined and recorded. The doctor was kind but clinical. Fractured pride didn't show up on x-rays, but the damage was all there. Contusions, split lip, tenderness along my side. I took photos, every angle, every wound, and I saved them in a new folder on my computer. I named it Evidence for Court. The call came at 3:14 p.m. Ethan's name flashed across the cracked screen. I didn't answer. I let it ring until it stopped. Less than a minute later, a voicemail arrived, his voice tight with panic. "Natalie, what did you do? The bank just called. The loan's off. They said the guarantor pulled out. What the hell is going on? Call me back." I didn't call back. I didn't need to. Instead, I opened my voice recorder app and saved the message. Then I added it to my growing folder, Evidence for Court. That night, just after sundown, someone banged on my apartment door. Not knocked, banged, fists pounding like thunder against the wood. I looked through the peephole. It was them. Ethan and Callie. She was screaming, her face twisted in fury. "You're ruining everything, Natalie. The house, the wedding, our future." Ethan's voice followed, shaky and desperate. "Please, Nat, we can talk. Don't do this to us. Think about Mom. Think about the family." I didn't open the door. I didn't respond. I just stood there, silent, watching them through that small, perfect circle of glass. And I felt nothing, no rage, no satisfaction, just a vast, quiet emptiness. Because they weren't sorry, not for what they'd done, only for what they'd lost. I blocked both their numbers. I disabled my doorbell. And then I turned back to my desk, opened my laptop, and started writing. I recorded every detail from that night, every bruise, every scream. I uploaded the photos I'd taken, my swollen face, the deep purple welt on my ribcage, then the voicemail, then the doctor's report. Line by line, I laid the foundation of my boundary, not one built of silence this time, but of evidence. And then came the twist. 2 days later, a letter arrived by certified mail, thick envelope, government seal. It was a restraining order, filed by Callie. Her statement read like a work of fiction. She claimed I had been stalking her for months, that I was obsessed with Ethan, that I'd fabricated the entire attack. For a moment I felt dizzy, like the ground had shifted beneath me. This was more than a lie, it was a trap. But then I looked at the folder on my screen, at every time-stamped photo, the doctor's signature, the voicemail, my bruised, unflinching face staring back. They thought they could rewrite the story. But this time I owned the pen. It was always going to be her. The first call after the storm, the voice I once ached to hear when things fell apart, my mother. But not to ask if I was okay. Not to check on the daughter who had been beaten in her own kitchen, no. She opened with one sentence, sharp and dry like sandpaper. "Ethan told me everything." I said nothing, just held the phone to my ear and waited. "I'm so disappointed in you, Natalie. After everything we've done for you, you're destroying your brother's happiness over a little disagreement." I closed my eyes, the pulse in my jaw throbbed. "Mom," I said slowly. "Callie assaulted me." Ethan stood there and watched. A beat of silence. Then, with a sigh so familiar it made my stomach knot. "Oh, don't be so dramatic," she continued. "Callie's under a lot of pressure with the wedding and the house falling through. I'm sure you provoked her. You know how you can be, with your tone, with your opinions, always so intense." There it was. The translation, "This is your fault." I bit my tongue, not because I was unsure, but because my chest was tight with something deeper than pain. This wasn't new. This was the same script I'd heard my whole life. I'd always been too much, too successful, too ambitious, too loud when I should have been soft, too independent when I should have been agreeable. I wasn't the daughter who needed rescuing. I was the one who embarrassed her at dinner parties with my job title. I was the one who didn't make space for the men around me to shine. "I have to go," I said, my voice stripped clean of all its layers. I hung up before she could respond, and for a moment I sat frozen. Then slowly, I slid down the wall of my apartment until I was curled on the hardwood floor, and I sobbed. Not because I was surprised, but because some part of me, buried deep beneath the years of knowing better, had still hoped she would choose me this time. That maybe just once she'd see me, really see me. Instead, she picked the lie that made her life more comfortable. It wasn't just Ethan and Callie against me. It was the whole system. I was never part of it. I was scaffolding again. Support, structure, background. And I had finally painfully decided I was done holding them up. Marissa came by an hour later. She didn't knock. She just walked in, dropped her keys, and found me on the floor. She didn't say anything. She didn't need to. She sat beside me, our shoulders touching, and held my hand. We stayed like that until the sun dipped low and the apartment turned gold. That night, I didn't cry again. I made tea. I cleaned the dried blood from my lip. I reopened the evidence for court folder. And I whispered to myself, out loud, in the quiet, "No one's protecting me, so I will." The day of the hearing arrived like a heavy fog. Everything looked normal on the outside, morning traffic, birdsong through my window, but I moved through it like someone in someone else's life. I wore navy, not black, not gray. Navy meant calm, measured, unshaken. Marissa met me at the courthouse steps, coffee in one hand, fierce loyalty in the other. Beside me stood Ms. Ellison, my attorney, short, silver-haired, sharp as a scalpel. Across the aisle sat the opposition, Callie in a pale blouse and trembling hands, Ethan in a pressed shirt, and my mother, somehow looking both ashamed and defensive, a united front of misplaced victimhood. Callie dabbed her eyes with a tissue before the hearing even began. Her lawyer rose first, voice steady, painting a portrait of a woman terrorized by her fiancé's unstable sister. He used words like obsessed, jealous, manipulative. He turned my achievements into flaws, said my stressful job made me erratic, claimed I had a history of emotional outbursts. I watched the judge, her face didn't move. Then Ethan took the stand. He spoke softly, like he was reliving some personal trauma. He said I'd made demands about the wedding, tried to isolate Callie, created conflict where there was none. He teared up when he said, "I just wanted my two favorite girls to get along." He was good, but he wasn't better than the truth. When it was our turn, Ms. Ellison stood calmly. "Your Honor," she said, "my client will not speculate. She will not defend against assumptions. She will present facts." The lights dimmed as she brought up the first image, my face, swollen, bruised, lips split. A hush fell. Click. Next slide. The urgent care report. Read aloud with clinical precision. Blunt force trauma, contusions, no signs of self-harm. Click. Then the final slide. "Your Honor," Ellison said, turning toward the screen, "we submit the following footage, dated and time-stamped." The video played. No sound, just visuals. I opened the door. Callie shouted, her face twisted. She lunged. She shoved me into the apartment. Ethan stood in the hallway. He looked bored, and then he walked away. You could hear the breath leave the room. I turned my head just slightly to watch them. Callie's mouth hung open. Ethan stared at the table like it might save him. And my mother, her hand flew to her mouth, not in guilt, in fear, because the story she clung to was unraveling, and the courtroom saw it. The judge's gavel came down sharp. "Petition for restraining order is denied," she said. She looked directly at Callie. "Ma'am, you are fortunate Ms. Granger is not pressing charges today. I strongly suggest you understand that false reports and perjury are criminal offenses. This court is adjourned." It was over. The story they tried to write over mine, torn. Marissa wrapped her arm around me as we stood to leave. "You did it," she whispered. At the courthouse door, my mother reached out. "Natalie, I didn't know." I looked her in the eye. "No," I said softly, "you chose not to." Then I walked away. After the courthouse, life didn't magically stitch itself back together. Healing never does. There were days I couldn't walk past my kitchen without feeling the ghost of Callie's shove. Nights when I'd wake up from dreams where I was yelling but no one heard me. But the silence was different now. It wasn't absence, it was peace. I started with little things. I bought new bedding. I rearranged my furniture. I deleted every photo that included Ethan or my mother. Then I did something I never thought I'd do. I signed up for a pottery class. It was on Tuesday nights, in a quiet studio tucked behind a bookstore. At first, I felt ridiculous. Everyone around me was sculpting vases or bowls that looked like art. My first attempt looked like a squashed mushroom, but I kept going. There was something sacred about the clay, about the weight of it, the way it resisted and surrendered in equal measure. It reminded me of myself, and with each spin of the wheel, each groove my fingers pressed into wet earth, I felt like I was forming something new, not just with my hands, but with my spirit. It wasn't about being good at it. It was about taking something shapeless and broken and choosing what it would become. At work, something shifted too. I was no longer trying to prove anything to anyone. I worked because I wanted to. I stopped dimming my light to make others comfortable, and people noticed. 3 months after the hearing, I was called into a meeting with the executive board. They offered me a promotion, Vice President of Client Strategy. I was the youngest in the company's history to hold that title. I didn't cry. I smiled. I shook their hands. And when I stepped outside into the sunshine, I felt taller than the high-rise behind me. That weekend, I invited Marissa and a few close friends over for dinner. Real friends. The ones who believed me when it wasn't easy, who didn't ask for proof before offering protection. We sat around my small dining table, laughing, eating pasta I'd made from scratch, sipping wine like the world hadn't just cracked open months earlier. The apartment glowed with string lights and something else, something warm and real. This was family. Not the one I was born into. The one I built. After they left, I stood alone in my kitchen. The same kitchen where it all came undone, and I felt steady. On the counter sat my latest pottery piece, a small bowl, imperfect but sturdy. I ran my finger along its rim, and for the first time in a long time I said aloud, I made all of this. And I meant it. It came in a white envelope with slanted handwriting I knew too well. Postmarked from Albuquerque, no return address. But I didn't need one. I knew it was from Ethan. I didn't open it right away. I left it on the counter for 3 days. Every time I passed it, I felt the past reaching for me with tentative fingers. But they couldn't touch me anymore. On the 4th morning, with sunlight spilling across my kitchen table, I opened it. Slowly. Not with dread, not with anger, just curiosity. The letter was 4 pages long, sloppy, wandering, guilt dressed as apology. He wrote that he and Callie were separating, that he was in therapy, that he missed me, that he didn't know how things had gotten so bad. He wanted his sister back. I read it once, and then again, and felt nothing. Not hate, not sadness, just a stillness I'd worked hard to earn. I folded the pages, tore them in half, then in half again, and dropped the pieces into the recycling bin. No fire, no revenge, just release. Later that afternoon, I stepped out onto my balcony to water the small cactus I'd bought the week after court. It was barely a few inches tall then, with only one stubborn stalk. I'd chosen it because it reminded me of myself, resilient, prickly, low maintenance. And there it was, a bloom, delicate, blushing pink, one fragile flower at the top of that tough, thorned body. I didn't even know cacti could bloom like that. I crouched down beside it, touched the petals with the tip of my finger, and smiled. I used to think strength meant not being hurt, not cracking, not showing weakness. But now I know strength is blooming anyway, in spite of it all. I took a deep breath. The air tasted clean. Behind me, the door to my apartment stood open, not because I was expecting anyone, but because I didn't need to be closed off anymore. The life I had built, every meal I cooked, every late-night laugh with friends, every imperfect piece of pottery, was mine, and it was enough. I had survived a family that demanded my silence, a brother who abandoned me, a mother who minimized me, a system that saw my worth only in what I could give. And I walked away from all of it, not with bitterness, but with freedom. So if you're reading this, maybe because you've stood in similar shoes, maybe you've been called too much, too cold, too emotional, let me say this. You are not too much. You are just too big for their small expectations. Choose your own voice, your own family, your own peace. I did. And I bloomed. I used to believe that if I was good enough, helpful enough, quiet enough, my family would finally see me. But sometimes the hardest truth to swallow is that the people you love most are the ones who hurt you the deepest. I didn't scream. I didn't fight back with fists. I simply removed my name and let the truth speak for itself. Because in the end, peace doesn't come from their forgiveness. it comes from choosing yourself. And when you finally choose yourself, you don't just survive, you bloom. If this story resonated with you, if you've ever been silenced, erased, or made to feel like you were too much, please know you're not alone. Share your story in the comments below. Like this video, subscribe to Sweet Revenge, Happy Ending, and let's start writing better endings, the ones we truly deserve.